I just got back from watching Spider-Man Brand New Day, and wow, what an amazing film. I'm going to do something now that I've never done before. I'm going to do a full review on the film. I wrote down a whole bunch of notes on my phone, and I'm going to sit here and talk about them. I'm going to start off with the non-spoiler section, and then go over to the spoiler section. Now, the non-spoiler section goes off the basis that you have seen the trailers of the film. Okay, so to get the non-spoiler section started off, we're going to talk about the CGI. Now, the CGI is greatly improved from the previous trailers that were shown to us. Overall, the film did look very good. However, there was a couple of shots where I was like, okay, this looks a little bit off. There was a couple shots of specifically the Hulk that looked a little off. I don't know if that was just me, and I was in kind of a weird seat when I was watching the film, so I don't know if that's why it looked a bit off. Also, there was one or two shots of Spidey swinging that I thought looked a bit off. But again, I think I'd have to rewatch the film maybe at home or just again in cinema to see if they really were bad shots. But besides those couple of shots that I noticed, everything looked as good as you'd expect it to. So coming off the CGI, we're going to swing on next into the action scenes. That was terrible. There was actually quite a lot more action scenes than I was expecting. And I think more than the usual Spider-Man film has, which was really nice to see. However, in the action scenes, they've done something different with this film, where they tried to make as much of it real as possible, basically. Tried to cut out as much CGI and tried to use as much real stunt people and sets and, do everything there on the day kind of stuff. While this did make things feel a lot better and look less like a CGI mess, sometimes you could kind of tell that people were just, on strings being pulled around. And that's fine. It's, it doesn't really take you out of the scene unless you're kind of looking for it, I guess. But sometimes it was very noticeable. If you know what it looks like when someone's on like a rope or a string, whatever it's called, you can definitely tell by the way they moved that they're on one in the scene. But again, it's like a 1-2 second thing in the scene. It doesn't really take you out of it. It's not that big of a deal, and I'm sure in the future films they'll make it look a bit more natural. Up next, we have music. Now, this is something that I wasn't really thinking about when I was watching the film, and even after watching the film, I also didn't think about it. And that's because there wasn't really any, at least for me, there wasn't any notable like music pieces. I mean, there was one that definitely stood out. That's for sure. That it was a bit random, but it only lasted like 2 seconds, so it was kind of brushed off quickly. But overall, there wasn't a lot of music that I felt added a lot to the scene, if that made sense. Like, there definitely was music, but I feel like it was just there, It didn't really feel, there's no like triumphant theme or, anything like that. Or at least not anything that stood out to me. Again, maybe on a rewatch, I'll notice something different like that. But on first watch, I definitely did not notice. Like, there wasn't a piece of music that I was like, wow, that's inspiring. That's like, oh, that's emotional. There wasn't anything like that for me. Okay, now to get a little bit more in depth, let's talk about the characters. Frank, or the Punisher, was very, very good in this film. He did not feel out of place, he did not feel out of character, and he felt like he was meant to be in the film from the start. Frank was very true to the character that had already been established in the MCU, and every time he was on screen, it just felt fun and interesting. Up next, we've got the Hulk, obviously very prevalent in the trailers, not so much in the film. His part in the story did make sense, but as a Hulk fan, I do wish he was in it for longer. However, I can say they did make him feel like a monster again. It felt more like 2012 Avengers Hulk than any of the recent Hulks we've had, and even a little bit like 2008 Incredible Hulk. Up next, we've got Zendaya and Jacob as Ned and MJ. I felt like the Ned in this film was a lot more likable and less of a comic relief character. In No Way Home, they made him very annoying, and his only part in the story was to just tell jokes. However, in Brand New Day, he definitely felt like a new person, and hopefully proceeds to grow as Tom's trilogy continues on. The final performance I want to talk about is obviously Sadie Sink. Now, because this is the non-spoiler part of the review, I'm not going to say her character, but I think from an acting standpoint, she did pretty good. I think she performed better than some of her previous roles, but I think the character that she plays is a little misguided. And to wrap up the non-spoiler part of the review, here's a couple things that I thought I should mention. I feel like the first half of the film, or at least the first hour and a half, is a lot better than the second half. Obviously, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I feel like the second half of the film was hurt by the fact that this is an MCU film. Now, on the positive side of things, Peter does wear the suit for like 80+% of the film. Almost every scene he's in, he's wearing the suit. And not just wearing the suit, most of those scenes, he's also wearing the mask. It's actually kind of rare he takes off the mask if he's wearing the suit. They make a point of it a lot of times in the films that he refuses to take off the mask, which is obviously great because the new suit in Brand New Day is almost perfect. Like, there's very, very little you could actually critique about it. Like, if you actually don't like the new suit, it's just preference or bias. There's literally nothing that can make you hate this suit. The final thing I'd like to say is that the overall theme of the film is very fitting. It's all about loneliness and how you should reach out to people, and I think that's a very good message. Especially today with things like the internet, where you literally have access to the entire world, and yet you're the loneliest you'll ever feel. But nowadays there's a bit of a stigma on reaching out and talking about how you feel, so I feel like this film tackles it pretty well. Overall, I give the film a solid 8.5 out of 10. And now we're getting into the spoiler part of the review, so if you haven't seen the film yet or don't want to be spoiled, click off now. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the Hulk, because as a Hulk fan, I have a lot to say. There was rumors and supposed leaks of Grey Hulk being in the film. Thank God he isn't, because they would have mischaracterized him completely. For those that don't know, in the comics, Bruce Banner has DID. This basically means he has split personalities, and for someone like Bruce Banner, it means he has split Hulks. Now, the Grey Hulk personality, also known as Joe Fixit, is basically like a mob boss. And the way that they were rumored to include Grey Hulk in this film would have basically been how he was in the film, but just grey. It would have been Savage Hulk, but grey, because they just felt like it. When I first heard that Grey Hulk was going to be in the film, and then I saw the trailer, and I saw how Hulk was in the film, I immediately knew that this was a terrible decision. But luckily, Grey Hulk is not in the film, it is just regular Savage Hulk. Another thing about Hulk is that both Bruce and Hulk look very old in this film. I know it makes sense for the timeline of things, but it makes me feel like after maybe Secret Wars, Hulk is going to be replaced by someone else. There's many routes that they can do a different Hulk replacement, but I guess we'll just have to find out where that leads. One thing I really, really love about this film is the dialogue between Peter and Frank. Specifically in the scene where they're fighting the Hulk, there's a moment where Frank tells Peter to deal with the Hulk so Frank can go do something else. And Peter tells him to just admit that he's afraid of fighting the Hulk. And Frank goes, yeah, I'm afraid to fight the Hulk. It's hilarious. There's another moment where Frank is shooting at the Hulk, and obviously this doesn't do anything. So Frank says he should have brought a bigger gun. And Peter just makes a passing comment about how the bigger gun would just tickle him to death. It's little moments of dialogue like that that just make the film so fun to watch. But they do a really good job of making the Hulk seem like a monster. Literally every 2 seconds, Peter is saying something about how the Hulk is not to be messed with, and how powerful the Hulk really is. There's a moment where Bruce turns into Savage Hulk, and you hear the Hulk say, no Bruce, only Hulk, and oh my god, I was creaming my trousers in the cinema, I swear to god. The Hulk looks so good in this film. I just really, really wish they made him more green. Like, they make Spider-Man so vibrant in this film, but they won't make the Hulk green. Honestly, the whole scene where they're fighting looked a little off. Visually, is probably one of the worst scenes in the film, just based on the colours. Besides the colour issue though, that entire scene was amazing, and I can't wait to rewatch that again. Something that I don't really understand is that when Bruce gets mind controlled, and he turns into Smart Hulk, but does that not kind of imply that Bruce can turn into Smart Hulk whenever he wants? I thought the general idea was that he worked in the lab to combine Bruce and Hulk into Smart Hulk, and then now he wears the inhibitor to make himself Bruce again. But when he loses the inhibitor in Brand New Day, it turns him into Smart Hulk. And then he turns from Smart Hulk into Bruce, and then Bruce into Savage Hulk. Which I feel like if you include Smart Hulk, they should have done Smart Hulk to Savage Hulk. Then that would have made more sense why they included Smart Hulk in the first place. Also, if you've seen the She-Hulk TV show, in like the first episode, when they have the car crash and Bruce loses the inhibitor, he turns into Savage Hulk. So surely the same thing should apply here. I think it's just a little bit of an oversight, and it doesn't really matter that much, but it's just something I noticed. So when Peter visits Bruce in the university, he tells Bruce that his name is Ned Leeds, which is obviously a name that he thought of on the spot. Bruce knows that he's not a student from his class, but they still have a conversation anyway. They talk about Bruce's inhibitor chip on his arm that stops him from turning into the Hulk. And then Peter talks about a universal one that could be applied to anyone. Fast forward to the scene right before Bruce turns into Savage Hulk, and Peter is trying to use the universal chip on Bruce to stop him from turning into the Hulk. Bruce sees the chip and asks him what it is. Peter says it's the universal inhabited chip. And there's a moment where Bruce is just kind of staring for a second, and in his head he's thinking, oh, you're that kid Ned Leeds that I saw earlier at the university. But this doesn't really do anything for the story. Like, sure, maybe now Bruce knows what Spider-Man looks like, but he doesn't actually know Spider-Man. He doesn't remember Peter. I don't think they even ever met before Peter made the spell. And then when Peter defeats the Hulk, it's because he calms him down, which is fair enough, but the way he does it, I didn't really like, to be honest. He ends up calming him down because he reveals that his name is Peter Parker, and he calls himself a friend to Bruce, which does fit the theme of the film and the characterization of Bruce and the Hulk about monsters being alone and not having any friends. But it just feels like an idea that they came up with in the writing room and they're like, yeah, that's good enough. I think it was because the action scene itself wasn't that long, and then immediately for Hulk to just calm down because Peter was like, oh yeah, I'm your friend. It just felt a little bit rushed. Overall, it was nice to see Hulk again. He was big, strong, and angry in this film, and I mean, what more can you ask for? Moving over to Sadie Sink's character, who is Jean Grey. I mean, just by watching the trailers alone, you could probably guess who she was, but there was two options. It was either A, she's Jean Grey, or B, the symbiote was somehow in the film and they edited it out, which was a possibility. The whole mutations and stuff, and you know, the way that the camera would swap between the people kind of did look like it was following, you know, something. But it was actually just to show Jean swapping between the people. Now, for me personally, I don't think Jean's story made that much sense in the film. The whole plot for Jean is that she's trying to find and get revenge for her sister who is taken away and killed by the DODC. But Spider-Man talks her out of this by saying she's not alone and that he also lost someone he cares about. It's supposed to show that they're similar and they have something to bond over. I don't think it makes much sense when he lost someone because a supervillain killed someone close to him to hurt him. But she lost someone because a government was trying to experiment on her sister and they were trying to use her sister's power for their own need. Like, it's just not the same, is it? It's like saying your father was killed by a murderer, and then your friend walks up to you and goes, yeah, I know how it feels. My pet rabbit was run over by a car. Like, it's not really the same, is it? And then also with the DODC plot, it doesn't, like, get explained what happened with the main guy that was running everything, and they literally see Peter unmasked, and sure, they might not know who he is, but Peter literally tracks Jean Grey's face throughout a whole section of the film using cameras that he hacked. So I'm sure the DODC could do the exact same with Peter. And if you're thinking, oh, why would they track Peter? They have no reason to. Well, they literally built those weapons specifically designed to counter Spider-Man. However, Jean's story is supposed to be about loneliness and, you know, reaching out to people. That is the theme of the film. And I do think it's fitting that Frank and Yelena are in this film because they both obviously are lonely people that, you know, find friends and families. So I think it's very fitting that they're both in the film. But moving on from that, Florence Pugh is Yelena in Brand New Day. She has 2 or 3 scenes. I think that she's a good inclusion to the film, obviously with the new Avengers stuff. And her addition to the film feels pretty natural. But now on to some things that didn't feel natural. Ned and MJ. Now, maybe being a little bit harsh by saying they didn't feel natural. Again, for the theme of the film being loneliness and reaching out, they were the obvious choice to add to the story. But it would have been nice if, they were just gone for one film, if they were just less prevalent in the film, or just not in the film at all, maybe. Maybe what they should have done is not have Peter interact with Ned and MJ until the very end of the film, where he realizes he shouldn't be doing things alone. And then in the next film, they can build up their relationship together like they kind of do in this film. I feel like it would have really made it a lot more impactful, and it just would have been a better story. One of the final scenes in the film is Ned and Peter doing their handshake, and this makes Ned's memory come back. And I mean, I guess, but I don't think that was very good. I don't think I liked that at all. Like, I get the sentimentality of it, and it's like, oh, they're doing something that only they did, and oh, look, this is that thing they used to do. Remember that, guys? But I just think it if you're Sorcerer Supreme and you're bloody. I mean, I know that Strange wasn't Sorcerer Supreme in No Way Home, but the point is, if you're a very strong sorcerer and your mind erasure spell stops working because of a handshake, like, come on. And again, I feel like they should have just saved it at least for the next film. However, a moment in this film that relates to that does it very well, was the rooftop scene with Peter and MJ. Oh my god. Peter swings MJ up to a rooftop. MJ's asking a whole bunch of questions like, did we know each other? And Peter's just trying to, brush it off and ignore it basically. But she's like, I have a right to know. It's all I've thought about for the past couple years. And then all of a sudden, MJ gets hands on and starts kissing Peter. And in my mind, I was like, well, what the fuck? This is a bit fast. What in the true love fairy tale bullshit is this? I was like, there's no way that this is gonna work, and there's no way that she would just jump into this. That doesn't make sense. Especially because she has a boyfriend. Like, they established that the boyfriend's a bit like iffy, sure, but she still has a boyfriend. I don't think MJ is the type to cheat. And then it gets revealed that Jean Grey is actually controlling MJ, and my heart sank when I realized. The look on Peter's face and how angry he sounded. He was ready to kill Jean Grey. And then I really, really like that immediately after that scene, they showed Peter and MJ swinging, and obviously it reminds you that she's scared of heights. Well, the scene before the rooftop scene is Peter and MJ swinging, but she's calm. She's not afraid. There's no fear at all. And it just shows you that it wasn't MJ, it was Jean. It's such a cool detail, and it really shows the attention and care that's been put into this film. Up next, we're going to talk about something that I particularly didn't like. There's a couple of scenes in this film that show flashbacks to previous films. One of the scenes being after Peter sees MJ kiss her boyfriend, and Peter just kind of like jumps off some buildings like he's attempting. Honestly, it kind of reminded me of Across the Spider-Verse when Miles is swinging between the buildings, and in his head and in the buildings, you can see things that people have said. If they'd made the scene more like that, I would have no complaints about the scene. But instead, they just kind of showed clips from past films. And then later on in the film, they showed more clips or even the same clips. And I feel like if they'd just done like an echoey voice in Peter's head instead of just showing the clips blankly, it would have been a lot better. It was almost like the film was expecting us to not have rewatched the films in like the last 10 years. You could even think of it as the film forcing it down our throats, like, oh, remember how happy they used to be? Well, they're not now. I understand what the intention was, I just think it could have been executed better. The main flashback of the film is an unseen moment with Peter and Aunt May. The first time we see this flashback, it's like a 3 or 4 second moment where Peter's wearing his homecoming suit and Aunt May sits on the bed next to him. When I first saw this, I thought they were going to show moments in between each films and fill in the gaps of the story's progression. One critique that a lot of people had was that after Homecoming, when Aunt May found out Peter was Spider-Man, it immediately skips to Far From Home, where it's just a normal thing. They didn't actually show that progression. They didn't show how that changed things or how she even reacted. So I thought they were going to fix that and show moments like that, maybe even show Uncle Ben. But no, it's just the same moment shown about 3 times, and it all led to a speech that, again, I didn't really like. Aunt May's speech is about being a monster and how it shouldn't make you lonely and stuff. And now at first I thought it was Peter speaking through Aunt May as if he's changed his memory. I thought, oh wow, he's changed what Aunt May said to specifically fit her, so, she's not trying to kill everyone. But then later on, Peter says something at Aunt May's grave, which clarifies that is exactly what she said to him. But in the context, it just doesn't really fit Peter at all. Why would Peter ever see himself as a monster? And also, just some of the other things that Aunt May says in that scene, just again, don't apply to Peter. So if they just made it where that was Peter talking through Aunt May's voice, it would have fit fine. Okay, and now a quick couple things that I wanted to include. First thing, there is no final swing scene, which I don't remember if it's the only Spider-Man film to not have a final swing. I feel like there's one other one, but I just can't quite remember it right now. Now, it does fit the theme of the film that there's no final swing scene. There's a moment where Peter's on the phone and he's like, oh, there's a crime. Should I come help out? And the woman's like, nope, you just relax. Don't worry about it. And Peter's like, okay, fine. Because it was Peter not relaxing that was making him mutate. But it is sad there is no final swing scene. I'm sure it would have been great. Next thing I want to say is that in the prison scene, they showed that Peter now keeps his organic webs and enhanced abilities. It's a pretty cool little scene, like a little 10-second scene. But I feel like it just gets brushed off so quickly for Jean Grey's storyline. And after that, obviously, because we don't see him be Spidey again, it just feels like it happens a little too quickly, or it's not brought up again, I feel like if they did have that final swing scene, it would have just reminded you one more time, like, this is a newer, improved Spider-Man, it's a brand new day, whatever. All his troubles are behind him, he's a new man. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Right before the film came out, there was a clip or an image of Peter at his desk, and he's got a bunch of monitors and tech and stuff, and people are complaining because he's not broke. Now, he's obviously not, he's not poor, behind on rent kind of broke, but he is pretty broke. The only reason he has that stuff is, I assume, because he's been dumpster diving. And there's a whole scene in the film where Peter's trying to make the chip, and he can't do it because he doesn't have the parts. And the only reason he can do it is because Frank has the parts he needs. So they do make a point to show that while he has this stuff, he doesn't have everything he needs or wants. Basically, he does the best with what he has. Up next, I've got the scene where MJ helps Peter to fix his chip. I felt like that was just really random. MJ mentions she was doing like biomed or something before she swapped to like aerospace, and it just felt like, it's like, I feel like they wanted to have another reason why, Peter couldn't figure out on his own, he needed some help, and someone came along and helped him. And it's supposed to be the whole arc of Peter realizing that he should have people around him, he shouldn't be alone because sometimes he needs help. But I feel like they were just like, oh yeah, let's just say she used to study this thing and she can figure it out. And in the end, it was like his lenses are causing an issue with the chip. Like, obviously, I'm not an expert in this science, so I don't have a clue if that's an actual thing. But I'm going to assume it is. I don't know, the scene just felt a bit weird, just saying that she randomly used to study this thing and she could solve it, but Peter couldn't. Peter is supposed to be extremely smart, but at the same time, he was going through a lot in the film, and his head obviously wasn't in the right space. So I guess it kind of does make sense that he didn't find that solution. Another thing is that the VMAX reveal and the VMAX storyline was interesting. All we know is that Jean Grey wanted VMAX. And then we find out that Jean Grey has a sister. We find out Jean Grey's sister tells Jean about VMAX. And then we find out that VMAX is actually the name of like a ventilation system. And when I first saw what VMAX was, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. It's just, a vent system. And then it kind of dawns on you what that actually means. And you realize the horror of the final message sent to Jean by her sister. However, if you're going to send your sister one final message, I don't think VMAX is the right thing to say. Both Spidey and Jean asked the DODC guy about VMAX, and he has no clue. So I was like, oh, obviously he's just lying. No, he actually didn't have a clue because it's the name of a vent system, and it's not even the name of the vent system, it's the name of half of the vent system because it's like a label that was scraped off. So obviously he had no clue. But as your final message to your sister before you die, there's no I love you, there's no this is my location, there's no don't come find me, there's no this is the guy that killed me. It's VMAX. Like, imagine if she had looked around the room and she saw a drinks can on the table and her final message was Mango Loco Monster, you know? Like, it's almost as bad as a reveal as the Ralph Boner reveal in WandaVision. Obviously, I'm going to quickly talk about the ending, Peter getting shot. I thought that whole scene was really cool. I like how he sensed it. And then I'm pretty sure you could hear the bullet coming before it hits him. I thought that was cool. And then you have the whole of New York coming together to try and support Spidey and say that they love him. I thought that was great. There's just a lot of little moments in that scene that make it really, really strong. And I think for the message of the film, that's what replaces the final swing. It's Peter Parker being surrounded by people that care about him, whether that be him specifically or Spider Man, and finally realizing he doesn't have to be alone. And then finally, we have the post credit scene. It's the Spidey tracker made by Ned showing that Peter goes off planet. It's obviously just a setup for Doomsday or probably Secret Wars. The reason I think it's more likely Secret Wars is because when the film ends, it says Spider Man will return, but it doesn't specify when. And I feel like if he would return in Doomsday, they probably would have specified that. Overall, I give the film a solid 8.5 out of 10. I feel like it being an MCU film is what hurt it a little bit because the Jean Grey stuff is kind of what weakened the story, but it is a lot of fun. It's incredible to watch. It's just amazing. I can't wait to watch it again, and if you haven't watched it yet, you definitely should. That's all from me today. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.